What's up, Victoria? It's Victoria. Today we're going to go back to 2018 and take a look at the popular makeup releases of that year. This is the third in a series of videos. I've done 2016 and 2017. Today we're doing 2018. Let me know what year I should do next. Before we dive into the products I want to discuss with you, I think there's some important context about where I was mentally, physically, spiritually at this time. For most of 2018, I was actually unemployed. I was laid off at the end of 2017. I worked at Sephora as a seasonal employee from 2017 into the beginning of 2018. They did not keep me after being a seasonal cast member. I was completely unemployed for most of the year. I did not get employed again until July. And then of course, when you've been unemployed for almost a year, it takes a while for your life to feel back in balance after your first few paychecks. I really wasn't paying attention to makeup releases. In 2016 and 2017, I had my finger on the pulse. I wasn't so into it that I knew about Trend Mood, but I did watch people like Tarte at the time, and I also watched the Girls of Beauty News. So I was kind of aware, but the second I realized I wasn't being kept at Sephora, I kind of completely just turned off the makeup part of my brain, other than using what I had. But I think I had such a disdain for it that I really even wasn't using makeup at the time either. So that's a very specific mindset. So I'm going to be looking at these a little bit more historically. I pulled out some things that I'm aware of because I did have a job the second half of 2018. Was kind of more with the makeup launches. So there are some in here that I have tried and have purchased. There is some just iconic cult products I want to talk about too. And the reason I wanted to do this video is to just take a look back and see what stood the test of time. I'm a real big fan of seeing what stood the test of time. It's something that's really important to me as a consumer, because when we look back at these launches that are now nearly a decade old, what is still being produced? What are people still buying? What are people still using on their channel? And having this much distance from the makeup launch and really show us what was worth our money, potentially could have us be better at looking at current makeup releases and maybe seeing a little bit into the future whether or not they will have any longevity, or are they just trendy makeup that we won't see being made in a couple of years. And it kind of works out a couple of different ways. I organized this list by brand in alphabetical orders, and it's non-exhaustive. Something I did notice making this 2018 list versus the 2017 and 2016 is that there were a lot more makeup launches. When I do this, I get my ideas about what was popular at the time from best of 2018 videos, worst of 2018 videos, and then I actually went through Temptalia, every release that she had marked. It's really hard to find a complete list of all of it because I think Temptalia doesn't talk about specific brands, so there will be no ColourPop in here. I don't pay attention a lot to ColourPop, but all of that being said, this seems to be the first year where the fast fashionification of makeup really kicked into high gear. We were clearly well on our way, but we went from having kind of seasonal quarterly releases to there was makeup coming out every time you blinked. There was a new product being launched. I also wanted to disclaim that we will be talking about some brands that I don't talk about or buy from. That's not the point of this conversation. We're really kind of explicitly talking about the makeup, but just know that there are brands that will be mentioned here that I no longer buy from or support. And I'm not going to note which ones throughout the video, but if you have been watching my channel for a long time, you'll know which ones I don't buy from or I don't mention usually. Disclaimers all being said, let's just get into this. We're going to start with some products from Anastasia Beverly Hills. The first thing I pulled from them was the Amrezy highlighter. I don't know who Amrezy is. To this day, I kind of still don't know who Amrezy is, but I'm assuming that she is a popular makeup content creator. Down the line, she also does another collab with Anastasia Beverly Hills that launched when I was working at Sephora. There must be a good relationship between this brand and this content creator. I never had this because I don't really care about Amrezy, and this must have come out in that dead zone whenever I was unemployed and not paying attention to makeup, because I truly didn't hear about the Amrezy highlighter until 2021, whenever I really was getting back into watching makeup content and really starting to make content myself. This was something that I would see in declutters a lot, and a lot of people hold very dear to them. This was apparently the perfect highlighter, and it is something that I still to this day see people requesting that the brand bring back. Now, I know they did a release of some baked highlighters, and there's one shade that's very similar to the Amrezy highlighter. And a lot of people are saying that that is just the Amrezy highlighter in different packaging. Maybe the contract ran up and they can use the formula again, and maybe they were waiting for that contract to be up, or whatever the non-compete or whatever was in there. Whatever the promise was, that must have expired. And maybe that's why they're making it. And I'm not saying it's 100% the same formula or 100% the same color, but I don't even know what color it was because I don't pay attention to Anastasia anymore. But I did like see that passively happening whenever they released those baked highlighters, that they should have left this in the past. And I think that they should have let this have been the one that got away. And I don't think it's something that they should have recreated. I think that they could sporadically re-release it every now and then, every other year or so, some excitement for the brand. And that is something that this brand desperately needs at this point. They really need people to be excited and talking about them again, but I think they have failed to do so. If you watch Jen Love, she has gotten into all of the stuff going on with ABH. It's interesting enough to like pay attention to, especially because it's happening in this industry. Anyway, all that being said, I'm not sure that making this a permanent product would be good for the brand or would have been good for the brand at the time, because we saw what happened with Champagne Pop and Jaclyn Hill and Becca. There was like a lot of drama whenever Champagne Pop became a permanent product in the line and it was like no longer associated with Jaclyn Hill. Here's the thing about highlighters is that they take a really long time to use, and like very few people, even people who wear makeup on the everyday, tearing through highlighter. Like Project Pan, like it seems like highlighter is always the thing that is like always the lingering, that or blush. You just use so little of it whenever you're using it. And considering the trend of highlighter ebbs and flows with how much we put on, or if we're even using highlighter at any given point. So like this is like something that I think if they had made it permanent, everyone wouldn't have cared about it the way they do now. So I think it was smart that they actually discontinued it. And it was really hard to find anything like it for a while. Now they kind of have that one shade that is this shade that they sell. And I think that was smart of them to give it enough breathing room, because I don't think this would have had the iconic cult status that it does today without it actually having gone away. All that being said, when I look at this highlighter, this would have been too deep for me, but I know that if I was into makeup at the time, if I was like really, really able to buy it, I probably would have. Like if I would have known that there was like this much hype around this highlighter, I would have bought it. But looking at it, it has quite the gold sheen to it, and I think it would be too dark for my skin tone. When I play with golds, especially like highlighters that have a gold shift to them, I have to be like very careful with like how gold it goes, because gold will leave a cast on my skin. I have like cooler leaning neutral skin. Golds and bronzes and stuff like that, I just have to be very careful with. My skin will take anything that's orange and make it oranger, and if it's not orange, it will make it orange anyway. Whenever I put gold on, especially if it's a very yellow gold, it just really warms up my face in a way that I don't think is super flattering. But today I have a lot of bronzes and golds on, and I think it looks really good, but it's not my usual gig, and I think that this would have not stood the test of time in my personal makeup collection. So I'm really glad that I missed the hype on this one. I'm glad I wasn't part of this. And I'm glad that people who have it are still excited about it. I'm happy to see products still be loved this far into the game. So I think that's really cool. Another iconic product that ABH released this year was the Sultry palette. This was a palette that I think still was being sold whenever I started working at Sephora again in holiday of 2018, but I definitely don't remember this product being launched. I don't remember this being an exciting thing that I heard about. Thinking about my time in makeup at this time, it's so interesting that there was like this almost year-long period where I wasn't paying attention to makeup at all, and there was still like releases happening that I like wasn't aware of. And I think this is really important context for the people who are like us online, looking at new makeup launches, interested in new makeup releases. There are people who still love makeup that don't pay that much attention to it and wouldn't know that. And I have been that person too. So I completely missed this makeup launch, but I do recall it being in Sephora when I was there. This is another product that ABH put out that I've seen a lot of people call for its re-release. Now they did release a 9-pan version of it, and it didn't seem to go as well as I think that ABH was expecting it to, because it's like, well, people have been requesting this for so long. The tides have turned and like trends have changed, and there is now a lot of people calling for smaller, more focused color stories. But whenever you're looking at a color story that is like really amped up neutrals with a lot of sparkle in them, a lot of people I think are getting that from somewhere else. And a lot of people I feel like who would buy a 9-pan palette have already moved past the 9-pan palette and are into duos or singles that will give you a very similar effect to a palette like this, whether it has all of the shades or 9 of the shades. And it lost that hot pink in it from the regular size to the 9-pan mini. I don't love that the hot pink is in this palette, because I find it really utterly confusing. It's just like you're looking at it and it's like, wow, there's like a neon salmon in here. And for what? And this seems to be a thing in a lot of neutral palettes. There always seems to be like a neon salmon peachy color in a neutral palette. The one from Makeup by Mario has it in it. There's just like this happens a lot, and I'm not really sure why we do this with neutral palettes, especially because a color that bright, I think a lot of people who would be into this neutral color story otherwise, they're just like confused by it, and they're like, could you just put another brown in there for me or another metallic in there for me? But when I look at this palette with my 2026 eyes, I am very into it. I get why people really like it, and I get why this is very popular. There's a lot of taupey, minky, and even cool toned bronzes in there that I think I would get a lot of use out of. And I can understand this being very popular because this is also kind of a transitionary year from colorful to neutral, not full blown, but I think the excitement over this palette could have pointed us into the direction of clean beauty. Obviously not, I don't think this palette pushed us into clean beauty. I think there are a lot of extenuating circumstances for the clean beauty movement that happens in the early 2020s. But if we paid attention to how popular this was because it was neutrals during an era where colorful reigned supreme for the most part, I think it's just kind of interesting to think about, because I think just like bronzy smoky eyes are very much the thing right now. And it was also, we were still doing like a lot of eyeshadow at this time. I mean, in mass, obviously there are still people who are on the internet now, and a lot of you who watch my channel who love to put on the most eyeshadow, and that's great. This fits well with that like intense smoky eye kind of shape that we were all doing at the time, that a lot of us were doing at the time, let me say. And I don't know, I just think it was really smart. And I'm not sure what's going on with ABH. Like I said, it seems like they're in dire straits right now. But this seemed like something that should have been permanent in my brain. Like, and I know they brought that mini back, but like, I don't know. I think this was really popular. I remember in the early 2020s, people being still excited about it and wishing that they would restock it. And then they did that mini palette and that kind of went over. It's like, I just don't know why this hasn't come back yet. I really don't know what's the smartest move for ABH at this point. They probably to distance themselves from its namesake owner would probably be the best thing for the brand. That's just my opinion. Let's move on to another brand. And this is like a sub-brand of another brand that I have actually always found incredibly confounding. And this happened between my stints at Sephora in 2017 and 2018. So when I came back in 2018, this already existed and I hadn't heard about it and I didn't know anything about it. But I think it's another important thing to note. Other than Pat McGrath, around this time, I did not understand luxury beauty and I wasn't very into it. So Dior coming out with Dior Backstage was like a big question mark for me, and I still have that question mark now, and I've never taken a deep dive into Dior to really understand. I think there's like 3 versions of Dior makeup. There's Dior, and that would be the stuff that has like the navy compacts and the silver writing on it. And then there is Christian Dior, which tends to be the weirder patterned things and the cushionier packaging. And I don't know what that means. Is that more expensive than Dior or the same price as Dior? Is it a different line than Dior? Why is it a different line than Dior? And then Dior Backstage comes along. It's like a little bit cheaper than regular Dior, but still Dior pricing, but it looks a lot cheaper than Dior usually did. And I cannot for the life of me figure it out what was the goal with Dior Backstage, and I still sit here today and am very confused about it. But I really wanted to focus on what was actually launched with Dior Backstage, because the Dior Backstage I think we know now is very different than the original version of it. What I've kind of gathered is that Dior Backstage is kind of like, this is what makeup artists would use at backstage at a Dior show. Very impactful makeup that might be a little bit trickier to use, which is a little more artistic than what we usually see from Dior, but not varying very much color-wise from what Dior regularly does. It's just like a little bit confusing to me. I still don't understand. So if you understand what Dior Backstage is and you know a lot about the Dior makeup line, I would love to hear it in the comment section. Or if there's a person who made a video, just tell me that a person made a video breaking this all down, because I don't know. I don't know, and I always feel ignorant whenever it comes up. Let's go back to the original launch and talk about what was actually launched at the time. The first thing I want to talk about is still a staple in this line. It is their blush and highlighter palettes, and they have reiterated on this many times over. And I think there's always a staple selection, and then they do limited edition versions of this a couple times a year. I know that a lot of people are very hype about this particular thing, and I don't get it. I have swatched these so many times and I don't get the allure of them. And I don't think that the Dior Backstage packaging draws me in like it does some people, that clear, clean packaging. It doesn't have the allure for me. And so I will sit there and I will swatch these Dior Backstage products and I'm like, I don't get what people like like about this. I don't get what people want about this. And I feel that way about the blushes and highlighters. But the people who have tried it have said it's very good. I know that Teresa is Dead uses these all the time, and she's always really excited whenever another one launches. Back in the day, Hannah Louise Poston really wanted this original one, and she would talk about that a lot. It was like something she highly coveted. I don't know if she ever got it though. like I don't even remember if this was something that ever came into her life. But yeah, I just like simply didn't get this one. But it is actually, I think, from the initial launch, maybe the most relevant thing that they had put out from that launch. They also launched 2 eyeshadow palettes. There was like a warm one and a cool toned one. And I can tell you why these had to go back to the lab. There was this weird time in the late 2010s where brands were starting to put eyeshadow primer creams inside of their eyeshadow palettes. And I don't know who called for that. I don't know what market research was done for that. It's like, yes, we all use eyeshadow primer, but I don't think any of us were like hankering for it to be included in our eyeshadow palettes. And I think really why brands were doing this was to draw attention away from MAC paint pots, which were a very popular thing to be used as an eyeshadow primer. And basically what MAC paint pots are just cream eyeshadows, and they were like, well, we can do that too. We'll just put it in here. But then you're kind of also missing out on just having a separate product for that you could upcharge for $30 on top of your eyeshadow palette. I'm just saying, maybe you didn't think that through all the way. I'm not really sure what it was, but I hate those. And I don't think that the modern versions of the 9pan palettes from Dior Backstage have that in it. I looked at their current offering. It looks like they still have a cool toned and a warm toned palette, as well as a couple other palettes that they have in their permanent range. I know that some people really like this formula, and I know that some of the colorways that have come out limited edition have not gone over as well as some of the staple palettes in this collection. I just thought it was interesting that they were like, you only need 2. We have a cool tone and a warm toned one. Have at it. Have fun, kids. And then they went on their merry way. Do any of you use the 9pan palettes from Dior? The colorways never have inspired me. Being a magpie, I do need some sparkle, some razzle dazzle in a palette. Like, I love a matte palette if it's really utilitarian and I can see the value in it, but I don't think one from Dior would look as utilitarian to me as like maybe another brand, like something like Viseart. Viseart is a makeup artist brand that does sell to consumers, and I think that they ride that line very well. They make those smaller palettes for consumers, and then they make the big palettes with a lot of product in it for makeup artists who are working on clients a lot throughout the day and will go through something like that. But normal people like us, we're not going to use makeup like that. When I look at Dior, it's like I'm not using that as a utilitarian product. It's so interesting how I think about things, but I just like the Dior 9pans. Couldn't care less about them. They don't allure me at all. But that's the same thing with the rest of Backstage in totality. So the first thing that they no longer carried that I was kind of surprised by is they had like a contour palette. To me, it looked like a bronzer palette. It looked like it had 4 bronzers in it. This seems like something that should have done really well in 2018, and I'm surprised that this was not something that got iterated on. We have not seen the Dior Backstage line do bronzers, I think, since this. And it's funny because they have those really popular powder blushes, and I'm not sure what the bronzers didn't hit for. I have not seen anyone talk about these. Like, and when I've gone back and watched content, I haven't casually come across these. Like, I can't even remember if I watched Michelle Wong talk about this particular palette. Bronzing was really popular at this time, so I'm wondering what didn't hit. Maybe the formula wasn't good. Like, this seems like a product that should have been a home run in 2018. It would have been a staple that we would have still seen today. Although I do think contour palettes are over. Much like other face palettes, it's like I only need like maybe 2 contour shades. I don't need 4. And kind of the same thing with the Kat Von D Shade and Light palette. It's like I could only really use the 2 lighter contours, but really only the lightest contour, and I wasn't using the highlighter shades. And I feel like that was probably how those ABH contour kits, it just feels like we are much more singular about contouring these days, and maybe this had missed the palette era and it also didn't transition into like singular contours or singular bronzers. But I think it's interesting they haven't really tried to like bring a bronzer product back to this brand. Another thing that Dior released that is really popular with like makeup artists, makeup brands is a lip palette. Okay, so I have a big problem with lip palettes being like in the consumer market. The only thing that I feel like can be done with them is they can be used in content. But the reality of you mixing your own lip color and then actually like wearing it throughout the day, it's like you can't reapply it. That's why bullet lipsticks and liquid lipsticks exist. It's like so you can reapply them throughout the day. I just think that lip palettes are completely impractical for the normal person. And I know that you can kind of like mix extra so that maybe you can put it in a little compact and carry it throughout the day. I just think that very few people are gonna want to put up with something like that. So I really only see a use value for these for makeup artists artists who are maybe doing something for a runway or working on a wedding and they need to manipulate a product to be a color that's more flattering for their client, or people who are makeup artists that do makeup on themselves that might need different lip colors for different looks, especially people who are just doing photography with makeup. This is something that I could see being valuable for someone who's doing that kind of work. But for the everyday person who is going to put on a lip product and wear it throughout the day, this is just completely impractical. Not only that, it's only got like blushy colors in it, so like warm pinks and maybe some cooler pinks. There's not even like a white, there's no primary colors, there's no white and black. So if you were to buy this as a working makeup artist, it wouldn't be a complete lip palette. So think of the one that ABH released. It had the primary colors, the white, the black, and then it had different versions of nudes and reds that you could manipulate. And at least with the primary colors, you could make any color you want and really affect any of those pinky colors to look more like a different color. The same thing with the Makeup by Mario lip palette. But let me also tell you this, that both Makeup by Mario and ABH have discontinued their lip palettes because it's just really impractical. I think the only two brands that make lip palettes in Sephora are Farah Hamidi and also Westman Atelier. But maybe Farah Hamidi's, now I'm thinking that Farah Hamidi's are lip palettes, but I think it's only one color in them. So maybe it is just Westman Atelier. All that being said, I always think lip palettes are a bad idea, and I side-eye any brand who tries to come into Sephora with a lip palette because it's just completely impractical for the normal person. And I don't know how the market research hasn't got them there. And you're not going to be the special one who gets it to land. I'm so sorry. Release just interesting lip products and we will buy the full size of it. I will say though, I think people are more open to customizing cheek at this time, or they would rather like layer a couple of different lipsticks as opposed to like doing the whole mixing thing. And finally, the thing that I think was the funniest thing that happened at launch with this brand was that they released brow palettes. They released a warm one and a cool one. And it had like a brow wax in it and then a lighter brown and a darker brown with the undertone that was promised in the title. I think brow powder is a hard sell. I used to work for the company European Wax Center. I worked in one of their stores. And when I worked there, they actually went from having very little makeup product to having a lot of makeup product. Anyway, one of the things that was in the original line and also carried over into the next line, I don't know what it even looks like anymore. I haven't been to a European Wax Center in a while. They used to, if not still, sell a brow powder duo. A brow powder, if brow powders work for you, will last you like till oblivion. I had one of those for years and it was like my only brow product for a really long time. I had hit pan in part of it, but like I still had so much around that it would have taken me another couple of years to use up. And now I don't have eyebrows at all, so I don't really need that kind of product. But I think brow powders are very undersung when it comes to a brow product. I think that they are more multi-use than people give them credit for because a lot of them you can use wet or dry. So if you do like to paint on thinner lines, if you have a thin brush, you would be able to do that with a brow powder if you sprayed it with a little setting spray or just a little bit of water and kind of made your own little slurry of it. Pay attention to what the brand says because not all of them can be used wet or dry, but they could be, you know, like it's like that's something that you could consider. And then that way you don't have to have like a little pen. You could like do it yourself. I don't know. I just think that they're more versatile. Anyway, I just think brow powders should be more celebrated in the brow community. And I think it's bullshit that they're not because they can make a really natural looking brow. And I just think people forget that. Anyway, I always think it is a bad release though, because I just think they're quite unpopular. I know that Benefit has like a brow powder tin where it's like the darker one is the first half of the brow and the powder is like in a brow shaped pan. But I also don't know how popular that is. Like I've seen people use it, but it's like no one's favorite product. So again, I feel like Dior Backstage released without a lot of thought and a lot of market research. Now, of course, they've gone on to release things that were a home run, but Dior Backstage is also a brand that I think reformulates more than any other brand. Like I don't think even Dior's regular line has reformulated as much as this brand has. And I want to say this because I don't know if it will come up in another one of these videos. A weird makeup product that I feel like was one that got away from me was Dior Backstage had this like huge powder and it was like a face and body powder. It was apparently so good and I'm like so sad that I missed it for some reason. And it's a powder. Like of all of the products that I would feel like was the one that got away, this like big pan of powder. It's like the one where I was like, I wish I'd got it because I just remember the reviews being very good. I think it had talc in it and then Dior started reformulating to get rid of all the talc. And I feel like the Dior Backstage line is always the one who has like the ingredient that gets discontinued, gets banned by the EU. It's like they're always reformulating and they're like, oh, didn't know that one was gonna be banned. Gotta reformulate that because their foundation got reformulated. I don't know. I just feel like this brand is in constant flux, but maybe that was the idea of the brand. I really wish that they would use use this line to do more editorial makeup and then see what editorial makeup sells, and then that could be put into the regular Dior line, or that could just be the purpose of the Dior Backstage is like editorial stuff, but their makeup's not really editorial. The colors and products and formulas are not so different than what the brand regularly offers, so it's a bit confusing to me and I still don't understand it. Let's switch our attention over to Fenty Beauty now. One thing that Fenty Beauty seems to not get right and it's so strange is eyeshadow. This is their second eyeshadow palette. It's the Moroccan Spice palette. Their first eyeshadow palette was, I think, an all shimmer palette that they released for holiday the year before. And I remember that people thought this product was mid at best, and the times have turned and no one talks about this product anymore. No one talks about any Fenty eyeshadows because the predecessor of this were the Fenty eyeshadow 6 pans that like clicked together for some reason. And I like never really understood that. It just seems like I don't understand because they've done such a great job with a lot of their other products where they've really hit it home, like with their lip glosses. To think about Fenty Beauty existing in this time, 2018, almost exclusively what people cared about were eyeshadow palettes at the time. For Fenty to have failed to make an eyeshadow palette that landed and has cult classic status, but survived that 2017 to 2020 era where it was all about eyeshadow, I think that's really compelling and interesting, and I wonder really how they did that, because it also took them a long time to create products that were highly repurchasable. There are a lot of brands that I think rely on highly repurchased products. So brow products, mascaras, foundations, where you have to go back like once every month or once every 2 months to rebuy it. If it's your favorite thing, you're going to rebuy it from the same brand. I would say that Benefit greatly benefits from product like this. Their best sellers are their brow products and their mascaras. And those are things that people have to rebuy every few months. And they will, because a lot of people really like their product and will rebuy it from them every now and then. The only thing that they had at the time was the foundations, I think. And those would have been something that people would need to buy once every month, every other month if they are wearing it daily. It took a while for them to get the eyeliners and the brow products and stuff like that. So it's really interesting just to think about them surviving the landscape of makeup at the time. But makeup was such a bubble that was almost about to burst. It kind of, all you needed to do was put out anything and people would buy it to review or buy it because they were excited about the brand. I think that brand loyalty was also a big part of what Fenty did, as well as other brands, but I think brand loyalty has really dissipated over time with the exception of a couple brands. I see very few people be like ride or dies for Fenty Beauty and whatever they put out, but like Pat McGrath has that cult status, Denona Marks has that cult status where it's like there are people who really like those people, and whenever they put something out, they'll Natasha Denona also has people like this, where it's like anything they put out is going to be something that they buy and is a home run. I just feel like we don't see that dedication anymore. But I remember at this time there were Fenty diehards because Fenty had just come out. They had done a great job with their foundation range and they were very inclusive and people were very excited about that. So it was a different era for Fenty as well. I don't think a lot of people have that same fondness and vigor for the brand that they did at this time, because I think a lot of us who were there when Fenty came out have been like watching what Fenty does and being kind of unimpressed with them for the last couple of years, but we were always holding a fondness in our heart for like what Fenty had done at this time. It's just interesting. Anyway, this eyeshadow palette is really kind of ugly, isn't it? It's a lot of neutrals with a couple pops of color. Photo that I have up here is pretty desaturated. I did go and search for like other pictures of it because I was confused, because I was like, these shades look really fair for what Fenty would usually have offered. It's just the picture that I found for the video that ended up looking this desaturated. I think there was a lot more saturation to it than what we're seeing in this photo. So I don't know if this is the best representation. I think this did not manage to do what the Sultry palette did. Texture is a really big part of the makeup landscape. And I don't think that brands or even consumers always know that that is important to the consumer until we don't see it. Looks like it kind of fell flat in the texture department. Something that Natasha Denona and ABH is also really good for is providing some different textures in it to make it more alluring with maybe some basic colors, because it's like, well, that one's going to look a very specific way when I put it on my eye, even though it looks a lot like the shade that's next to it. They do offer something different. This looks like a lot of the same. And even though there are blues and purples against those peaches and warmer neutral colors, we can get that somewhere else. But the only reason that I really remember this palette is my friend lived in Morocco at the time, and I was like, in Morocco, which is something we said all the time. Because you know, when your friend lives abroad or a friend studies abroad and they come back and they're like, well, in Italy, when I was in Italy doing my study abroad, it's like, okay, girl, shut up. You lived a life. Shut up. The next product is a product that I'm gonna buy. I was doing research for this video and I was like, why don't I have one of them? And I'll tell you why I don't have one yet. But Hourglass launched their scattered light eyeshadows at this time. And if you watch my channel, you know that this is like something that is completely up my alley these days. I love a one and done eyeshadow. I love a one and done eyeshadow with a lot of sparkle in it. For example, on my eyes today, the sparkle on my eyes is one of the Victoria Beckham lid lusters. It's just a pan. I have some other eyeshadows on as well. It's not on my eye exclusively, but I put Tea Rose on my eye all the time by itself. I put Mink from Victoria Beckham on my eye all the time. My favorite part of my makeup collection, especially when it comes to eyeshadow, is my little compacts of my little beautiful shimmery things. You know, I love them, my little shimmer pots. And this is a little shimmer pot. This is something that I remember launching because I think it launched closer to holiday and I remember swatching them all the time. I would go over and swatch them all the time. Now at the time, I was much more into color and I was not as opposed to warm tones. So I was like, I would be over there and I'd be like swatching, and I'd be like, oh my God, they're all so pretty. Oh my God. But like, I would never buy one because I knew I would never use it. And I knew I would never use it because I had previously bought, what are those called? The Tarte had a similar product to this that had maybe some more duochromy colors in it. I had one of those and I never used it, even though it was so pretty. But Tarte had something very similar to like the lid lusters. I don't think they make them anymore. So like this was like something that I was always interested in. And they did do a trio of these for one holiday and they were minis, but there was a exclusive shade to the 3-pack. And I thought that one was the prettiest one. It was like this beautiful raspberry pink. And I was like, I want that one, but I don't want to buy the whole thing to get the one. And again, I was much less into luxury. So Hourglass was one of those brands that I would side eye at the time. And I was like, I don't really understand what we're doing and what you're about. Now Hourglass still is not like a perfect brand to me. Obviously, I don't own a lot of Hourglass. I don't celebrate Hourglass a lot on my channel, but I like understand what they're doing a lot more. The clientele that they are for, they work really well for, but I'm not always the clientele for all the things that they release. But the main problem with this line for me now, when I look at it, is that a lot of the shades run warm. There's one shade called Smoke that I'm very interested in. I don't remember ever seeing it in person. This is one of those parts of the Hourglass line that is never kind of fully there to explore whenever I go to Sephora or Ulta. There's usually only like 1 to 3 shades. And even when it launched, I don't remember Smoke being there, but I was not as interested in that kind of color at the time. So I probably didn't pay attention. I was probably like, oh, a neutral gray. Ugh. But now I'm like, give me the sparkly neutral gray. There's also the shade Ray, which is warmer. I think Ray probably would read a lot like the shade on my eye right now, Tea Rose. So I probably wouldn't need it. And I definitely feel like Ray is the most popular shade and is normally in the stores. And I've swatched it a couple of times. Anyway, this product is really cool and very up my alley, and I think was a good iteration on a thing that I really love. And it's interesting, this is still stuck around. They still sell all of the colors on Hourglass's website, and a lot of the retailers have all of the shades online, but not always in store. I think if this got revamped a little bit, not even reformulated, just revamped, I think if they went to the color line, got rid of some of the shades that are not as popular, which I fear that Smoke probably would be one of those shades, but I think if they just like amped up this shade range a little bit, a lot more neutrals with different undertones, maybe a very powerful duochrome, like that would be interesting for Hourglass, but not interesting for other brands. I think that there's something there that I think if they did a re-promote with a shade extension on this, I think would go over very well. And I think a lot of people in my corner of the internet would be like, I am going to buy that actually. So I would love to see it. Hourglass, call me. Hourglass, send me smoke. Let's move on to a product that was definitely style over substance, and it is the release that Jeremy Scott did with MAC. Now, if you're not familiar with this, everything in this line kind of was related to music of like the early aughts. So there was like a mixed CD blush palette, there was a boombox eyeshadow palette, there was a lip palette as well, and it looked, I don't even remember what it looked like. I think it looked like a mixed tape, like a cassette tape. The aesthetics of this was very cool. I just was like, whenever this came out, I was like, wow, this looks very cool. I think that I was starting to pay attention to makeup releases again whenever this came out. And I was like, will this be the first thing I buy now that I have a job again and I can afford something? And I actually did wait for reviews on this one because I was like, it's kind of expensive for what I want. MAC was a little bit turning the tides to being irrelevant in the makeup world. Whenever influencers came up, MAC did a really bad job seeing the future and seeing that might be a thing that they should participate in. And it took them a really long time to get into influencer marketing suffering severely, even though that whenever beauty YouTube was on the rise, MAC was incredibly relevant. People would put their MAC shades in their description box to let you know, like that was like a clear indicator of like what color people used, but it just wasn't like that at this time. And the further away from it, it seems like it's less and less relevant, like what MAC does. Although I think that people are paying attention to them again. I think that neutral lipstick launch and the re-release of some of their cult classic lipsticks kind of brought them back into the fold. And I think people are like kind of looking at what they're doing again. And I think while they have our attention, they need to tread very smartly to keep our attention. But it does seem like they're kind of making moves to keep themselves relevant. What do you guys think about that? Anyway, back to this. I love music. I made so many mixed CDs. I made so many mixtapes. I traded so many mixed CDs with my friends. It was just a core part of like that era of my life. And I really love it. And I think about it fondly. And this like was maybe like the closest thing a nostalgia release has ever gotten to actually getting me. But at the time, I feel like we were not doing as much nostalgia mining as we have done in the early 2020s. I don't think nostalgia bait is as popular to do right now. And I think a lot of us have fatigue with nostalgia stuff because we're also seeing it in media. All of the shows are just a show that got canceled 20 years ago being made again with the same people, but then not being pushed forward in any kind of way. And I think that's kind of how we feel about makeup too. It's like, okay, it's time to move on. Like, let's make some good products with some formulas that push us forward. That's what I want. I want to see formulation and colors and things that we don't see often or a lot or haven't seen at all yet. Like, I want to see that in makeup. The nostalgia of it all is interesting, but like didn't fully get me to buy this palette. And this was reviewed very poorly. People did not like this. It was kind of a known fact that in their limited edition palettes, the formula wasn't as good as their singles. And it does seem that we have also kind of as a society moved past MAC singles to be the standard for a single eyeshadow. And there are so many cool indie brands that have incredible formulas now that sell their eyeshadows at much less of a cost, especially their mattes, but then also can offer beautiful textures and finishes that MAC does not offer. So it's like kind of why would we even pay attention to MAC when it comes to eyeshadows? So while this really is kind of like dated and didn't work out for them, it's still something like I kind of just wish I had the boombox thing, but I wouldn't go out of my way to buy it. I just think it's cool. But also, isn't Jeremy Scott like bad? I don't know if that's 100% true, but I feel like somewhere along the timeline I was like, we don't like Jeremy Scott. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we didn't even like him at the time. Moving on to an eyeshadow palette that I actually had and actually just got rid of was the Natasha Denona Gold palette. Natasha Denona's Gold palette to me is the gold standard of an eyeshadow palette color story. And I just said I decluttered mine, but that's for a lot of different reasons. But let's just like talk about the palette. This palette took the color gold and then kind of stretched it into all corners of what gold could mean and look like. We have like the green golds, we have some more yellow golds, we have some more neutral golds in here, and the mattes that were in there also complemented that. And I just think that's such a good take, and there was a beautiful texture in it, beautiful textures for the time. And I think that's like the thing, it's for the time. These textures were really gorgeous and they really held up for a really long time too. And this product was incredibly relevant until its discontinuation in 2021, I think was when this was officially discontinued. And I got mine while it was being discontinued. I was like, well, I do want to try it. And I bought it during my no buy. It was the only thing I bought during my no buy. I really did love it for a little bit of time. And of course I was interested in buying it because Hannah Louise posted and really liked it. And I was watching a lot of her content. And that was really why I wanted it. And then I did buy it and I used it for a couple of years. Yeah, the reason I decluttered it is that I just don't wear a lot of golds. And this is like, I'm saying a lot about gold makeup when I have like goldish, reddyish makeup on my face. And I'm like, I don't wear a lot of that. And that's like all you're seeing on me on this video. But it's true. If you go watch any of my other videos, you'll see me putting grays and grays and grays on my face. That's kind of the main reason. And the textures in here taught me a lot with like how to play with texture in a way that I find interesting and compelling to me. I'm really grateful for that. But also I find that the topper shades, Sparks and Kava, they were like interesting and really cool for what they did at the time. But there are a lot of topper formulas that I find much more useful now and I will reach for over that kind of formula. Some of the metallics in there were thicker. It wasn't singing to me anymore and it was just time for it to go. But I just still think that Natasha Denona really like nailed this eyeshadow palette just like, it's just so good. It's iconic for a reason. It's really a shame that they released the golden palette in its stead, because it's like it lost all of the cool things I thought that the gold palette had. And you know what's so funny is I would have had the gold palette a lot earlier than in 2021 because whenever I worked at Sephora, it was marked down because it was supposed to be a limited edition holiday release, I think, when it first came out, and then it got extended in life for a couple of years. I remember it got like marked down, and we had this in our store for some reason. We didn't carry Natasha Denona. There was no official display for it in our store. And I was like looking between that, and it was on sale for $70, and so was the Sunset palette. And I had a gift card, and so it would have like, it was only going to cost me like $50 when all was said and done, like my discount and then my gift card and then however much it was marked down. And my coworker talked me into buying the Sunset palette, which was okay. I did use the Sunset palette a lot when I had it. That got decluttered and depotted a lot faster than the gold palette did in my makeup collection, but I wore those orange sunset tones for a long time, and kind of the same thing. I just don't wear those tones a ton. Every now and then I get inspired and feel like wearing them, but they're not my favorite colors to wear. I could have had it for a much longer time. I wonder if I would have used it more than I used the Sunset palette. I don't know. I just very rarely spent a lot of time using one eyeshadow palette a lot, unless it was the Viseart Cool Mattes palette, which I did actually finish a couple of those. It's really weird what I end up sticking to and using all the way up, and the other things that I continue to ignore in my makeup collection, especially when it comes to eyeshadow. But moving on with Natasha Denona, a more tragic release from the brand was the Tropic palette. Ooh, if you were there, you remember it. Now, I feel like I was kind of paying attention to makeup again at the time because I remember this coming out. I remember it launching, I remember seeing it in person, and I was kind of like, this was really interesting for Natasha Denona to do, because up until that time, other than the Leila palette, Natasha Denona's palettes, while they had some colors in them, they were very grounded versions of the colors. I had both of the 28 pans that she had released, and there was like a green blue one and there was like a purple one. The greens and the blues and the purples in those palettes were really beautiful and worked very well. So I don't really know what happened whenever we transferred those blues and greens with like a little more punch into the Tropic palette, but the quality of this was trashed left and right. And all the people who were singing the praises of Natasha Denona were like, do not spend your $125 on this palette. This palette's a mess. This got marked down really quickly, and it got marked down significantly. You like did not have to buy this palette at full price, and it just lingered and lingered for years and years, I feel, because people weren't buying it because its reputation was that it was really bad, and then no one bought it more because it was really bad. I wonder if this still pops up occasionally whenever Sephora like digs through their warehouse to find old product. If you pay a lot of attention to the sale page of Sephora, which I don't anymore, there just would be days where like an ancient product that you thought no longer existed will just pop up and be available again. And you're like, wait a minute, what? I wonder if that ever happens with this palette. But I feel like this is Natasha Denona's most shameful release as like a piece of product. Clearly not the most shameful thing that Natasha Denona does. As far as palette releases, I think it is the most shameful one. Let's move on to a brand that I used to buy literally everything they put out, Pat McGrath. Whew. Okay, so I'm not going to comment on the bankruptcy that was recently announced. Amira, she did a video about it if you want to go watch that. I thought that was a really good breakdown of how things shook out, but I don't feel very like, I told you so about that. But I find that the way that the brand has been talked about in beauty media to be like quite interesting, because a lot of the outlets are like, how could this have happened to the brand? And I'm like, you just clearly weren't paying attention to what people were saying about it. And then there was also more conversations that are being had that I think are really relevant, but we're not talking about that. Let's talk about the Bronze Seduction palette. This is Mothership 4 or 5? Mothership 4 or 5. I don't remember. I think it's 4. So this was, I think, the first eyeshadow palette I bought after being employed for a while. I was like, let me treat myself to a Pat McGrath palette, because when I was unemployed, I had just bought a Pat McGrath palette and then I returned it so I could get my $125 back. I was like, yeah, I don't need to hold on to this while I don't have any money. What happened to my Pat McGrath palettes now? They're all gutted. They're gutted. I took the shades I liked and then discarded the packaging. That's what's going on with my Pat McGrath palette these days. But this was the first thing I bought from Pat McGrath after being unemployed for a very long time. And I was really obsessed with this palette when I first got it. I really used this palette a lot. And I would I bet if I could go back in time and count how many times I used each palette, that would have been the one I used the most. It's not the one that would have ever been my favorite after I had all of them, but because it was my only Pat McGrath for like a year or so, I used the heck out of it because it was the only Pat McGrath palette I had. And in particular, I really liked some of the baked shades on the right-hand side. I never really used like the red, but that rose gold above it was just the moment for me. And then the other two white shades in there would like shift from green to red and have some champagne sparkle in it. They're really pretty. Like, actually, I think maybe this is the most well-formatted Mothership. I think that is the most wearable. And that was actually the thing of note at the time. For a lot of people, those first three Mothership palettes were a little bit confusing and confounding. You had the first one, which was all blue, gray. A lot of people weren't into those color tones at the time. I was always pro cool tones. I've always been cool tones. Now I am more pro cool tones than I've ever been, and I don't wear a lot of warm tones. But again, I understand what my face looks like in this video. That was a little bit confusing. And then I don't know why the green one was never really viewed as a neutral palette, but now that I look at the green one, the third one, Mothership 3, it's like very clearly a palette that would have been very wearable. But because we were so into warm tones at the time, this palette came out and people were like, this could be my everyday palette. And that turned it out to be that way for a lot of people. I feel like this is a lot of people's first Mothership palette. This was the one that I think really started resonating. And maybe the first time some people were like, maybe I am willing to spend $125 for an eyeshadow palette from Pat McGrath. And I think they did a really good job with this one. I like that there is a deep aubergine purple instead of like a black or a brown. And then the other browns around it are also very usable browns. The bronze shimmers that are not the big shades, I think are very easy to use. Yeah, it just was like a really thoughtful palette from Pat McGrath, which they do again in a couple of years after this. And then I think that's also what gets them into trouble, is that they swung too much into the boring. I think that this does a successful job still being editorial while also being wearable, because that red is a lot, and a lot of people don't wear red eyeshadow like that. Even with us being so into warm tones, like red was like that one step too far. It was like a lot about oranges and ruddy browns was what we were really calling neutrals whenever we were wearing makeup back then. This was like the favorite Mothership for a couple of years until Divine Rose came out. And then Divine Rose, I think, was a favorite for a while until all of us realized it was like maybe going to be the reason for the downfall of the brand. Pat McGrath also released in 2018 the Mothership palettes, but the Motherships without the vowels in it. So the Motherships. At first it was 3 6-pan palettes. I think that this was like a push to not make Pat McGrath like more affordable, but maybe get some people who would not spend as much on the Mothership palettes to maybe try out the brand. La Vie en Rose palette, which was the pink purple palette, which I of course bought. I have bought these. I think they were supposed to be limited edition. I think they were limited edition. I bought them at the tail end. They were on sale. I was working at Sephora. I had a discount on top of it, and I paid very little money for these 3 palettes. And maybe I didn't buy all 3. I know I got the La Vie en Rose one, but I don't know that I ever got the white one, although that's the one that speaks to me the most now. This was definitely a good way for people who were willing to spend that much on Pat McGrath to try out some of the formulas. Something that I think the brand could have done a little bit earlier is offer some things that are in a price range that people are more willing to pay for, because the mini selection from Pat McGrath throughout the years has been questionable. I think this was the best version of something that was considered like more small for Pat McGrath. The other thing is the people who have these hold on to them for dear life. I feel like my formulas for these went off way faster than the ones from the Mothership palettes. I don't know if these were also formulated in Italy or what, like I don't remember all of that information. But yeah, I just think that these were a moment within themselves, and like collectors, this is like really important for Pat McGrath collectors, but I don't know that these have really stood the test of time. I don't know that I ever see people like lusting for these to come back. And I think kind of like I said about the depths of the Sephora warehouses, like I feel like occasionally these pop back up every now and then for sale, but I would say hold your money. I would say the Mothership is still kind of the way to go if you really want to experience like the full Pat McGrath experience. The smaller palettes I don't and haven't historically done it for me when it comes to a Pat McGrath release. Let's talk about a flop from a smaller brand, which I feel really bad for ragging on this brand, but I think it's really relevant. Sugarpill and the Little Twin Stars collection. This was I feel like up until a couple of years ago, you could still buy the remnants of this collection on their website. I love Sugarpill. I love what Sugarpill has to offer. I think Sugarpill is such a cool brand. I love that they make bright, vibrant singles for people who need them. I know a lot of drag performers like to use these eyeshadows because you can like refill the pans. The pans are large. You're running through makeup a lot. And also they offer some really nuanced colors that you can't find from a lot of brands when it comes to mattes. I feel like they were the first culturally relevant indie brand, if that makes sense. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I think there are a lot of other indie brands that have come up since Sugarpill's like prime and kind of made the brand a little more irrelevant, but people still talk about them every now and then. I just think that their foray into eyeshadow palettes was not as successful as others. And I'm not sure if this was like their first eyeshadow palette, but it's an eyeshadow palette that was very poorly received. I don't think I ever tried the eyeshadow palette, but at some point I had those lipsticks and they were not good. And I've tried other lipsticks from Sugarpill that were really good. And I don't know what it was about that blue and that pink, but they did not do it. And it was just sitting on their website and sitting at all of the other retailers for so long. I feel like I saw it as cheap as like $5 for this palette towards the end of its life cycle. And I remember Teresa buying it once because it was just like cheap. And she was like, it's actually like the worst eyeshadow palette I've ever used. It's such a shame because Sugarpill does really good work. And I would obviously always love to see an indie brand succeed if Sugarpill wants to do more than what it's already doing. And I think Sugarpill has its very own specific clientele that are still shopping with them. But I think that they would have to do some more singular textures. It's like, I don't know. I think it's a really hard sell to have most of your brand be like matte, colorful eyeshadows these days. You just need to provide a little bit more. And there are other brands doing more interesting things like Cleona or, I don't know, like just doing much more interesting things. And you can buy colorful mattes from Cleona. You can buy colorful mattes from Sydney Grace. Like you don't have to buy them from Sugarpill anymore. And it's like, I don't know. I was on their website and a lot of their stuff was sold out. And I was like, is Sugarpill still? ? Like, are they still making things? Are they still trying to make things? And it'd be sad to see them go away. But I would also understand if they went away too. There's no winning. As you can see throughout this video, I've talked about a lot of eyeshadow releases because this is when eyeshadow reigns supreme, but I do want to talk about a product that is not an eyeshadow palette for a second. Too Faced released their Born This Way Sculpt and Conceal concealer this year, and this is a really great product, and I still think it's a really great product. I don't have it anymore, but when I was still wearing full coverage product, this was my favorite of the full coverage things, and I wasn't going to try it, but someone I worked with was like, you should try it. It's a good full coverage concealer. I think it's better than Shape Tape was, and a little went a long way, and I think you could make it look really skin-like if you knew what you were doing. Full coverage, full beat. If you're into that sort of thing, I think this is great for it. You get a healthy amount of product in it. It's still really good. And if I were to do full coverage makeup again, I think I would go try that again first. But it's not the kind of finish or coverage that I'm into these days. I like everything to feel a little more relaxed on my skin, on my face. So very serious. But if you're into that sort of thing, I still think it's really good. It's still around to this day. And I think that says a lot. I do think that Too Faced cycles through complexion products kind of quickly. This one has stood the test of time, and I understand having tried it. I think I went through 2 of those in my time. Very good product. And it's just exciting to see a product that launched that year that I still think is good and is still available to purchase. The Shape Tape foundation failed to launch this year, and I'm just gonna leave you with this clip.
Fair sand, fair neutral, fair light neutral, light neutral, light sand, light medium neutral, light medium honey, medium sand, medium neutral, medium tan honey, deep honey, rich sand, mahogany.
I actually have more products on this list that I pulled to talk about. I've been filming for a while and I've been talking for a while, and I would like a break. And I don't think I really need to talk about the last 2 products that I had on this list, even though it would only be 2, but I just feel like I'm running out of steam. So I'm going to pause for the cause, and I'm just going to wrap up the video here. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing by using the subscribe button down below. I also have Patreon and channel memberships if you're into that sort of thing. Check those out. If not, no worries. As always, I will have a pinned comment with links to support people who need your help right now. If you have any additional funds right now, please considering helping any of those organizations. And I also have a resource to help people in Minnesota directly who are being affected by ICE, and it has a bunch of different options of different things you can donate your money to. And there's also mutual aid resources there as well, so you can directly support a singular person if that's how you would prefer to spend your money. And I also have 5calls.org down there. Please call your representatives if you live in the United States to tell them to abolish ICE or defund ICE, however you would like to phrase it. Use the phrasing you would like. But those scripts are down there for you as a resource. That's going to be it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to follow your hope and you'll find me. And I'll see you in a video very soon. Go forth. Tits out.